"Leave me alone!" I shouted. I was little back then. Well, skinny anyway. I've always been tall. Being tall and paper-thin never intimidated anybody. To top it off, I had a bad stutter. That made life even harder for me. "You're the son of a monkey," one of the bigger Arab kids said. I was living in Bahrain with my mother and stepfather. I had never put much emphasis on race or the colour of my skin before. I mean, why would I? I was just trying to survive, with a mother who hated my guts because I looked like my father. I had bigger issues to be concerned with. But here in Bahrain, among all these Arabs, I was just a black boy. They didn't see the Arab woman whose womb I came out of. I was just an abd, slave to them. I found it strange they would call me this because many of them were darker than me and had much nappier hair than I did. Maybe it was because I was American and brown with nappy hair that they assumed I was black. Of course, their assumption was right. "Your father has sex with goats," I shot back. These Arab kids' English was not very good, and my Arabic was horrible, so understanding each other's insults was a difficult task. The bigger Arab kid looked at me with an amusingly stupid expression. I couldn't help but laugh. I figured if he couldn't understand my English, I would try and act it out for him. I put my hands on each side of my head with just my pointer fingers up to indicate horns and made a goat sound. Then I pointed at the bigger Arab kid. "Your Ummi is a goat," I said, then humped the air as dramatically as I could. "Your Baba had sex with your goat Ummi," I said as slowly as I could. I watched with amusement as the Arab kids talked among themselves, trying to figure out my game of charades. When the big idiot figured out what I called his parents, his pale face filled with rage. "Ah, Abda," the big Arab kid said. Abda meant slave in Arabic. It's what they called black American kids. It was in reference to the transatlantic slave trade that I was descended from. It was a slur. An insult to say that all I am is a slave, and all I ever will be is a slave. I'd been called racial slurs so much by these Arab kids that it no longer hurt my feelings. When I first got to Bahrain, I thought the Arab word for kids who looked like me was abda. It was later that my mother told me what it meant. The big Arab kid pushed me hard. I stumbled back but recovered quickly. The Arab kids laughed at me. I hated being laughed at. I ran forward and pushed the big Arab kid as hard as I could. He fell flat on his butt. His smaller Arab friends stopped laughing. The big Arab kid's face turned red with anger and embarrassment. I knew he was more upset that some half-black kid knocked him on his ass more than anything else. He got up quickly, his white thobe dirty with mud. I knew I was going to have to fight him, and he would probably kick my ass. But I would not back down. In Bahrain, I was just a black kid that no one wanted around. I felt like I was representing all black Americans. If I punked out, it would be a reflection on them. It would make it harder for the next black American kid that found himself in this dusty hellhole. I put up my hands like I saw boxers do on TV. I didn't know how to fight. But he didn't know that. I discovered early on that being black had its perks. Everyone expects me to know how to dance, fight, play sports, or sing. Of course, they were all stereotypes, but when it came to ignorant bullies in third world countries, it played in my favour. The Arabs saw my boxer stance and were hesitant. The bigger Arab kid did not want to chance fighting me alone. He nodded to his two friends, and they grabbed my arms. I tried to pull free, but they held me tightly. The big Arab kid punched me hard in the stomach. He kept calling me a black slave in Arabic as he punched me several more times. One of the Arab kids holding my arms pointed to some broken glass on the hard dirt road. The big Arab kid smiled wickedly and dragged me over to it. My heart started to race as I saw the glass. I thought they were going to try and kill me. I struggled harder and managed to free one of my arms. I punched the Arab kid holding my other arm as hard as I could in his face. I felt something crack as my fist landed on his nose. Blood squirted onto my face as the kid screamed. He covered his nose. Dark, red blood dripped from between his fingers. The older Arab kid grabbed me and threw me as hard as he could to the ground. My knee landed in the glass. Hot pain shot up my leg. "Stay down, black slave monkey," the big Arab kid said. His accent was so thick I could hardly make out what he was saying. I knew my knee was cut. It burned. But I did not look at it. I knew if I did, I would pass out. I hated the sight of bloody cuts, even more so the ones that show the meat beneath the skin. The Arab kid whose nose I busted grabbed a bunch of mud and rubbed it in my thick curly hair. My mother never wanted to let me get a haircut, so I always had an afro. "Mud for mud, baby," the Arab kid said in broken English. They laughed at me and ran off. I stayed there for a moment with my knee in the glass. I was afraid to move or look at it. But I knew I couldn't stay here. I took a deep breath and tried to stand. I screamed in pain as I lifted my knee up. There were pieces of glass sticking out of it. Blood dripped from around the shards of glass. I crawled away from the glass and waited for the wave of dizziness to pass. Dirt and mud fell in my face from my hair. My mother was going to have a fit, not because I was hurt. I honestly felt like my mother enjoyed the racist bullying that I got. It seemed like my mother didn't see me when she looked at me. All she seemed to see was my black father that she hated and despised. No, she wouldn't care that I was hurt. All she would care about was having to wash the mud out of my afro. The glass protruded from my knee. It hurt too much for me to try and take it out myself. I couldn't put pressure on it. One of the few good things about living in Bahrain is that most houses had high stone walls around them. So I essentially had an endless wall to lean against as I limped home. Arab people would see me and shake their heads. They never offered to help me. Blood was dripping from my knee. I limped badly. My face was swollen, and my afro was caked in mud. I was just the son of a slave to them. Not only was I black, but I was biracial. Being a mutt here made you a social outcast. Even the few Africans I saw here treated me like shit. I guess it's the culture to make biracial people feel like they're not wanted anywhere. I wondered if that was how people like me were treated all over the world. If mixed people were treated like some leper. I wondered if that was how I would be treated in America. I was born in America. My mother married some Arab man shortly after I was born and moved here. I hated living here. Aside from the obvious racism, I just hated the people and the culture. There were many beautiful things about living in the desert among the people of the desert. My stepfather had a huge house. On top of the house was essentially another house but with no roof, if that makes sense. I would go up there and stare at the night sky. I had never seen so many bright stars in my life. Staring at the night sky here gave you no choice but to contemplate God. I wondered if that is why they are so religious here. It took me a while to get home. As soon as I reached the gates to my stepfather's huge house, I sat. I was extremely light-headed. My knee still dripped blood. I'd left a trail of blood in my wake for miles. I looked around to make sure no one was looking at me. When I could find no one, I placed my head in my hands and sobbed. I had held this in the entire time. I felt I had to be strong here. I was representing black Americans, and I had to be strong. My knee hurt so bad. I limped and bit my lip for miles to keep from screaming out in pain. I just wanted a hug from my mother. I knew that was a wish I would never get. My mother hated me. I can't remember the last time she hugged me. I would watch her hug my big sister Maya and imagine it was me she was hugging. I don't know why my mother didn't love me. Maybe she was like everyone else in this cursed desert and hated me because I was half black. I found myself often wishing to just be an Arab. Maybe then my mother would love me. Maybe then I would be accepted. Maybe I would be the one bullying a mixed kid. Life would be simpler and easier for me if I was just not mixed. Ya Allah Habibi! A familiar voice cut through my tears. I smiled when I heard the voice of my stepfather's first wife. She was always kind to me, giving me the love that my mother never did. I quickly wiped the tears from my eyes, not wanting her to see me as weak. Salaam alaikum, Ummi Hana, I replied. Ummi meant mother in Arabic. I respected Hannah very much. She treated me like I was her own son. Perhaps it was because she was barren and couldn't have children of her own. I figured that was why my stepfather took my mother as a second wife. He wanted more children. Hannah rushed towards me, showering me with hugs and kisses. She looked at my knee and started shouting for the maid in Arabic, her lips pursed in disappointment. She knew I was being picked on by the Arab kids because I was half black. I was picked up and rushed inside. My stepfather had guards and his own doctor on call. I lived better than most of the kids who bullied me for being a mutt. I knew that only made them hate me more. They thought I was beneath them, that I should be poor and begging them for scraps of food. But I knew now I would be okay. Hannah would give me a bath and wash the mud from my hair. The house doctor would take care of the glass in my knee. I was still afraid of facing my mother, the woman who gave birth to me yet hated me.